Ted was was a groomsman in my sister's wedding because he was fraternity brothers with my brother-in-law. And we kind of met then. We went out.
What was it about him?
Heart. Not obvious.
No?
Apparently not any.
This is not going well.
So our first date we golfed, then we played basketball, then we did some tennis, then we went mountain biking. We're super, super competitive.
But she was like, oh, I'm a great volleyball player. And I'm like, oh, well, I've never played volleyball, but I bet I'm better than you are. And she's like, oh no, I was great. And so I got a volleyball, and I'm gonna hit you one, and you block it. I thought I'd just hit an easier one, and just smashed it right in the face. What's this have to do with anything?
You were just funny and made me laugh.
I either had to get married or get a maid. I was hungry, and clothes were dirty. That was a joke. That was a joke. Cut. This isn't going the way I wanted it to go.
Got engaged and got married 6 months later.
Even when we were dating, we knew we wanted to have children.
Well, remember I told you?
Yeah, you said I'm gonna have 12 children.
A baby, have another one, raise him. And that was it. And there was Luke.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then we found out we were having a boy.
Mm-hmm.
So you were thrilled.
Very.
And there he was.
It was wonderful to see a perfect little baby boy for a grandson.
I was totally in over my head. Are you kidding me? I didn't have any idea I'd take care of a baby. If it wasn't for Wendy, I do remember putting a baseball, a basketball, and a football in his crib. You know, on the first night he was home.
And he wanted to play.
Yeah, he was playing pretty early though. And it just kept going, he just kept getting more and more into it.
As soon as he was probably 2, he would triple basketball through the grocery store. We were planning kind of a basketball team with little kids when Luke was in 1st grade. A period of like 3 weeks. He was eating a lot and losing weight and thirsty all the time and going to the bathroom all the time. And we kind of just played it off, and then it just kept getting worse and worse. And we took him to dinner one night and he ate his meal, then he ate his sister's meal, then he asked for another meal. And he was just drinking huge glasses of water with the meal, and then he threw it all up. And on the way home, we're like, okay, this is something else.
It was a bad night.
But we didn't want to take him to the emergency room on Friday night in the middle of the night.
Mm-mm.
So we did the next morning.
Why not?
Because we knew what was coming, I think. And I think we knew. Once we kind of put a couple pieces together, I think we knew what the diagnosis was going to be. And I wasn't in any hurry to get to that hospital.
So I remember Ted called my dad that night, who's a physician.
Called me up on a Friday night and told me all these symptoms Luke was having. And he actually had wet his pants twice at school from excessive urination. And he had never, ever done anything like that before. So the following morning I came down here with my glucometer and stuck his finger.
Which took like 30 minutes because he was screaming.
Because he would not let us prick his finger.
And we're like, oh, we can't prick his finger, we're in for it.
I was petrified of needles. Wendy's petrified of needles. Luke was showing strong signs of being petrified of needles.
Yeah.
Yeah. He went crazy. Just for that first finger prick, just to get that drop of blood. Took us, yeah, probably 30 minutes. Luke was crying, and I was like holding him, and Wendy's dad just looked at me and shook his head, you know, indicating that's what he's got. And I told Luke, you know, I'm sorry, we have to take you to the doctor. And he was like, you know, I'm not sick, I'm just thirsty, I'm totally fine. And I was like, no, you're not.
I've seen and taken care of so many people with diabetes and the complications of diabetes that it's scary. What happens to those children is they go along with uncontrolled blood sugars and they start to run into the complications of juvenile diabetes. Blindness, kidney disease, they develop renal failure and have to go on dialysis. They can, for instance, get very low blood sugar in shock. Luke's had a couple of close calls. If he's awake, he can tell if it's low or high usually. But if you're asleep, you don't always know. And if you get a real low blood sugar while you're asleep, you can actually end up brain damaged. It can happen fairly quickly, yes. I've seen a couple diabetic children who were found by their parents to be unresponsive and brain damaged permanently.
And when he said, "Oh, you got to take him to the doctor," we thought, "Oh, we know now."
That was very hard for me.
That was tough. That was another good day.
The whole way in the car, he kept saying, "I'm gonna be fine, I'm gonna be fine, I'm so sorry.
Right.
They'll just give me some medicine."
Right. He said, "Give me some medicine. They won't give me a shot." He kept saying that. They won't give me a shot, right? They won't give me a shot.
Because he hated you.
And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, you're going to have multiple shots every day until we find a cure. What can we do? What do we do as parents so that his life is as close to what it was like before he was diagnosed? Even though they had the manual, they were guidelines. They weren't really do this. It was like, here's what we suggest, but it may or may not work. So there's a lot of trial by error.
For some reason, I thought it was very, very important that he get back to his normal life sooner rather than later. And they wouldn't let us out on Sunday.
Mm.
And I said, okay, but he needs to go to school. And they said, okay, you can come on Monday. And I don't know why it was so important, but I immediately called the school nurse and I said, he's going to be back at school on Tuesday.
It was scary and a big learning curve for the school.
And you need to be ready for him. And as soon as we got home from Raleigh, I ran over to the school before it closed.
And Wendy was in tears, and I could see the shock and the devastation in them.
I said, this is what you need to do for Luke. Because I didn't want Luke to think that he had anything that would keep him from school. I just wanted to go, oh, here we go, you're fine, this is what we do every day. And he missed one day of school, and he was back at school the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think had I thought about it too much, I wouldn't have sent him, thinking, what's his blood sugar going to do?
Right.
How's the nurse going to know what to test him? How are they going to know what to feed him? What happens if he passes out? I didn't let myself think that. Playing the basketball game the next week. Yeah. And it's kind of been like that ever since.
Just keep moving forward.
Luke has been involved in athletics ever since he's been old enough to walk virtually.
And I remember saying, right, well, will he be not as good of an athlete as he was? And he said, no. He'll be just the same if you control his blood sugar.
Right.
25 years ago, the complications of juvenile diabetes were much worse because they were not treated nearly as well as they are now. We didn't have the insulin pump and the things that Luke has been able to take advantage of.
I think his diabetes forces him to be a little bit more of a leader, and I think that pushes him to the next step that you probably don't see out of young kids at his age.
He is the most together kid I think I've ever met. He truly does look for the good in other people, naturally.
You know, I know he wears a pump, and I know it makes it a lot easier on him to play sports and probably function in everyday life.
I used to be able to not even be able to go over to a friend's house unless they were like within 10 minutes away, and now I can.
Any little thing that makes life easier is huge. Anything that makes him safer.
And they're getting closer to this artificial pancreas. It's hard. You know, Wendy's good. I mean, she knows how to take care of the counting of the carbs and all. And she's around a lot to be able to take care of him. I can't imagine doing this as a single parent. I can't imagine doing it with a child who isn't mature about it. There's so many scenarios that I don't know how they do it. So for those folks, they need a cure really, really bad and really fast.
Curing juvenile diabetes they've been at it now for a number of years, and it's been tough. And it's going to take a lot of money and devotion.
It's hard. It's hard to see kids in pain and struggling. It's very hard.
I think it's unfair. Because, see, I don't really know about it that much, but I do know that it's a disease. Maybe he could die, I don't know.
It's very upsetting to see your own grandchild, or child, with not as good a life expectancy as you'd like for them.
As things stand today, Luke is going to deal with juvenile diabetes the rest of his life. Now, during that life, there are all kinds of risks. He's going to face challenges, complications, or other conditions that arise out of this type 1 diabetes. So Elizabeth and I hope with improvements in treatment and hopefully down the road somewhere, a cure so that he will no longer have to deal with it. That's our hope and dream and prayer.
Well, I remember even when we were at Riley for the 3 days, Ted and I played the It Could Be Worse game. We still play the It Could Be Worse game, because that's kind of how we had to get through it. And he'd throw out, well, it could be worse, I just walked by the burn unit, we're not in the burn unit. And I'd be like, well, it could be worse, he could have lost an arm. And while you could argue, and I'm sure an educated physician would say, well, the life expectancy of somebody with one arm is a lot longer than somebody who has type 1 diabetes. That would have been harder on his life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Sucks. I mean, well, best part's at school when you feel well when you go down to the nurse when you miss math class.
I feel like why Ted and I were chosen. Sorry. I feel like for Ted and I, it's made us better parents and better people because we're stronger and maybe more empathetic and maybe realize what's important more than we did before. But I always had a hard time as to, well, why Luke? Like, I understood for me, and I'm like, I'll be strong and I can deal with it. And I felt super equipped. You know, we can look at the best research and find the best places for Luke to go and have a great family support, but it's just hard for a 7-year-old to have to deal with it. But then I look at Luke and I'm like, you know, most people probably that you would talk to would be like, you don't even know Luke has it. You know, he's smart and funny and doesn't complain and still loves to do sports. And so I thought, well, maybe that's why, because he can be such a role model to other kids and other people. And I always say to Luke, someday you'll know why you were chosen, because you're going to make a difference.